Welcome. On the square today, we will be discussing the disturbing story out of Kenya, the discovery of mass graves and emaciated victims. Some are still adamant in their dogged religious beliefs, refusing aid and dying from starvation even after rescue. Followers of a self-acclaimed Good News International Church in Kenya have been turning up dead in mass graves in several secluded settlements within the Shakahola Forest. These followers had been convinced that in order to meet their creator, they must starve themselves to death. The death toll now stands at 73, with 26 new bodies exhumed on Monday. The astonishing reports in the media is that some members of the church found by the authorities have refused to eat despite clearly being in physical distress. A member of Haki Africa, the rights group that tipped off authorities, Hussein Khalid, believes some church members were still hiding from the authorities. Another disturbing thing about this story is that the cult's leader, Paul Mackenzie, is known by the Kenyan authorities. Before his April 14 arrest, he had been arrested twice before, in 2019 and in March this year, in relation to the deaths of children. Each time he was released on bond, and both cases are still proceeding through the courts. Kenya is a deeply religious country, no doubt. Over 85% of the people will understand are said to practice Christianity. As a result, cults are common. But this is one case that is causing shock across the board over how dozens of people could have willingly starved themselves to death. To speak on this, I have on the square Jane Mwangi, a journalist from Nairobi, Kenya. I also have joining me a little later John Lemerele, certified security expert and author, director and founder, Pan-African Shield College, Nairobi. Bishop William Abuka, Faith Community Fellowship, Homa Bay County, Kenya, and Carol Nyanya, founder and team lead in Singi Trust, Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you all for joining us on this square. Now, I'll start with you quickly, Jane, so we can let you get back to work. Has there been any further development with the case since the discovery of 26 more bodies yesterday?
As for today, they are and the director of execution.
Jane, sorry to interrupt you. Is it possible to remove your earpiece so we can hear you clearly? Your voice is fading away.
Okay, can you hear me?
It's a little better now. Go ahead, please.
Okay, what I was saying is, as by now, the bodies, we stand at 83 bodies have been discovered as per today, and 212 people have been missing. And as per yesterday, 26 others were rescued. And some of the followers of Mackenzie refused to talk because they say that Pastor Mackenzie told them if they fast, they're going to meet their Jesus. So we still don't know if they're going to cooperate with the media. We're still hoping that they're going to come out and tell us what really transpired and what really made them to fall into such temptations.
What updates can you share on the rescued victims? You said about 26 since we last got the news from Kenya have been rescued. Both, we know that previously they've refused aid. Has that now changed?
I don't have answered your question.
I'm trying to get from you what is being done for the rescued victims. What can you tell us? Is there any update? We know previously they were refusing help and food. Has that now changed?
Okay, that's according to that, it has not yet changed because they still believe that Pastor Mackenzie showed them the way to go, and that they're not supposed to receive any food from any person, but that, as I said before, we are hoping that the survivors who were rescued, 26 of them, they're going to cooperate and probably tell us more.
Aside from President Ruto's tough statement about cracking down on some of these churches yesterday, what concrete updates do you have about the case against Paul Mackenzie?
Pardon your statements.
I'm asking about the case against Paul Mackenzie, the leader of the church that had people starving. There is a case against him. Is there any update since yesterday?
Okay, there's no update on the case. What we know is that Mackenzie had been arrested before and he was released on a cash bail of 10,000. But since he was arrested, they say that he's going to be arraigned in court, which has not yet been done because they're still going on with the investigation to see if they're going to come with valid and concrete evidence against Mackenzie.
All right, Jane, thank you very much for all the updates from there. I'm sure we'll be coming back to you for more. Thank you again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Carol, let me come to you, please. Your movement really is to encourage better Christians and to help those that are less privileged. So I'm going to ask you, the message of starvation that is being pushed by the likes of Paul Mackenzie, is that part of the Christian doctrine?
Actually, maybe let me start from Isaiah 58 about the kind of fasting that God has called us to. This is the kind of fast of the fast day I'm after, to break the chains of injustice, to get rid of exploitation in the workplace, free the oppressed, cancel debts. What I'm interested in seeing you do is sharing your food with the hungry, inviting the homeless poor into your homes, putting clothes on the shivering ill-clad. So it's actually the direct opposite of the kind of fasting that God has called us to. Instead of starving people, we are meant to be feeding people.
Okay.
Yeah.
What has been the reaction of the Christian community to the news coming out of this Paul Mackenzie's cult? That's what it's being described as. It's no longer described as a church. We know that it is Good News International Church, but the narrative has now changed. What is the Christian community doing?
I've just seen that there has been, the Catholic bishops have come out and condemned that, and I've seen also there's a call of tighter, stricter guidelines for registering of churches, which Mama Ida Odinga had called for last year, but there was a huge uproar. But I also follow one of our reverends here in Kenya called Sami Wainaina. He asks that if, as the church, we cannot govern ourselves, we would need external governance. So I think there's also a lot of fear because some pastors believe that if this happens, if there is outrage, they will also be questioned. And a lot of churches which have not registered, which are very unscrupulous, which are taking corruption money, which are actually not spreading the good news of justice, but perpetuating injustice, will be captured under that net.
I know this question must have come to you at some point. How did Paul Mackenzie operate for so long without being exposed for the acts of making people starve to death in the hopes that they will see Jesus?
I think he's been caught, and I saw one of our state leaders, Ezekiel.
Yes, we know that he has been to court several times and he has been arrested at some point. But he didn't just start. He's been there for a long time. He's even in the media preaching similar message, if I understand correctly. So how come the Christian community did nothing before the situation escalated to this point?
I think I want to tie that with prosperity theology, and also because of the current social conditions in this country where the poor are extremely, extremely poor. And so there's a group of Christians who hold on to this message of a better life after this. And why he flew below the radar, I think it's corruption. I think it's the church is a participant in corruption. And so when he's arrested, or even some of the members of the church are state officials as well, and so he will go under the radar. He went to court, he was granted bail, which is his right. But I think also the National Investigation Services also failed, because this is their work. This is the work of this government, of the special branch of the police, to arrest such individuals. And like, even why he moved from where he was before was because of the conversation around children being murdered. And so I think there's also fear within state officials on what they call touch not the anointed, where they also are fearful. And I think state fear as well, we need to explore state fear coupled with religious dogma, and how we can call how those two interrelate.
Okay, this one is more to do with, you talked about fear, touch not the anointed and all of that. It seems to go with the scenario of what the Christendom has evolved to become. There is also argument about indoctrination and radicalization. Which do you think happened here, and how can movements like yours help to de-radicalize or get these people who have been indoctrinated to shift their perspective?
I really think that this is a spiritual matter, but it is more a social economic matter. A lot of these people go into these spaces because there's the belief and there's the faith that's sold onto people that they will get a better afterlife. I think if we sort out the material condition of people here and now, a lot of this will end. We pray, like a lot of churches pray on the poor material condition of people, because then it gives them some sense of hope of an afterlife. And so the church is not consistent in seeking for justice of the people in this life, because then there's an afterlife which they can sell to people. And so for me, the issue is social economic, but it's also a thing of ideology as well.
Okay, what can organizations like you do to help victims like we've seen in the past few days?
We do that through community education and a lot of working with church leaders, working with activists, with human rights defenders, and talking about the role of the church in pursuing justice to the community and being agents of social justice in the community. And so if we are in spaces where injustice is happening of all kinds, perpetrated by whoever, church, state, and the community, we speak out against injustice.
All right, Carol, well, let's go on a very short break. When we come back, I do have more questions for you so we can understand and unravel the situation around developments like this. Do stay with us. Thank you for sticking with us here on The Square. And like I said before we went on the break, the conversation continues with Carol. I also have John Lemerele, certified security expert and author. He is also the director and founder, Pan-African Shield College, Nairobi. Also joining us is Bishop William Abuka, Faith Community Fellowship, Homa Bay County, Kenya. All right, let me start with you, John. I put this question earlier to Carol. How did John Mackenzie operate for so long without being exposed on the starvation count that he's been carrying out? This couldn't have been that hidden if he had been in the media. John,
thank you very much for the opportunity.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you very much for the opportunity. But first, I like your question, but to be able to answer that, I think I'd like to possibly take you back to, a case, such a case that happened in 2018. So it's not the first time that this particular kind of an incident happened in Kenya. As a matter of fact, in the year 2018, there were reports of a cult operating in that particular county, that is Kilifi County in the coastal part of the country. And this particular cult was involved in human sacrifice and other violent practices, just as it is in the case of the one that we are seeing now. And that particular cult at the time was being led by an individual named Tabitha Mwangi, who was also known as Nabi. Nabi in Kiswahili basically means prophet. So his name was Nabi Tito. And of course, following the reports of those particular activities, authorities in that particular county launched an investigation and exhumed, several bodies believed to be victims of the cult practices. And some of the bodies who are reportedly actually missing organs. And this led to speculations that they have been used, for ritual purposes. So we are seeing a repeat of this kind of an incident again at the same county. And of course, it is a shocking example of the dangers that are posed by cults and religious extremist groups. And of course, it also highlights the need for authorities and communities to be vigilant. But how this went unnoticed again basically means that someone slept on the job, because these organizations operate, within communities where there are people, there are governments, there are societies, individuals who could have, either reported this particular matter or authorities who could have detected and prevented it from happening. So how this happened, of course, then leaves a lot to be desired and a lot of questions than answers. And I think for me, someone has slept on their job.
So if this is known, it is not new. From your perspective as a security expert, what would have been the actions that community and government would have taken that would have made some sort of difference in the outcome that we have today?
Thanks. Good question again. So I think detecting and dealing, with cult activities and leaders, of course, can be a very complex and challenging task, particularly for law enforcement agencies, in as much as we are saying that someone slept on their job. Because what happens is that these cults most of the time operate in secrecy, and most of the time they will use what we call psychological manipulation sort of tactics to control their members. And of course, that said, still the intelligence community, the law enforcement community, or those charged largely with that duty of protection, in this case, the police, can easily deal with this situation in different ways. I think one of the ways that they basically need to do that is gathering information. So in my view, I think the law enforcement agencies should always gather information about cults and their leaders through various sources, including, of course, former members of those particular cults or organizations. They could speak to family members and other law enforcement agencies or groups, And of course, this information can be helpful in understanding the group's beliefs, practices, and leadership structures, which then will help them deal with this particular situation. In the case of Kenya, for
Okay, I think the network took him off for a bit. Let's bring in the bishop. Bishop Abuka, if you can hear me, I just want your perspective on the concerns being raised about unregulated religion practices in Kenya. Churches just, they're everywhere. One of our guests already mentioned that there are churches that they're in local areas where nobody regulates them. How can this be better managed?
Thank you so much, Madam Felicity, for this opportunity to also share my grief and deepest condolences to the families and friends of the bereaved. I also want to share with every one of us in Africa and in Kenya particularly the concern about how some self-made or self-confessed religious leaders are conducting themselves around Christianity. I won't, however, say or agree to the suggestion that the church in Kenya is not regulated. The church in Kenya is registered by the government. The church in Kenya pays taxes. The church in Kenya pays all the other dues and fees that are necessary. However, I think there is a gap somewhere that needs to really be looked to. And the gap is the government authorized the other day, because it is not right for the government to come in to police the church. The government authorized what we call oversight bodies. They are called oversight bodies because they are a meeting or a congregation of bishops, church leaders in a given area, and they police each other. There are fellowships that sit maybe once a week or once a month, and they look to each other's welfare. They are their own brother's keeper. This has gone on for so long, and I think they're doing some commendable work. However, we have some pastors who do not subscribe to umbrella bodies, as they are popularly known in Kenya. They are called umbrella because they provide the oversight, they give the helicopter view of the operations of a given section of the body of Jesus Christ, that is the church. If, say, for the Homa Bay, you would have a Homa Bay pastors and church leaders forum where they meet every Tuesday and they hear, presentations from every church leader about what they are doing. We have those who do not subscribe to such. They are independent, they are lone rangers, they do their things the way they want, unsupervised. I think this is a gap that has been very, very seriously exploited by such people. And the government probably needs to come in very forcefully to join the umbrella bodies and ensure that whatever they are dispensing makes every church leader within a given locality to subscribe to that, so that we don't have free rangers doing things like the one we are seeing in Kilifi, Mombasa, where almost 100 people have died unnoticed, unfortunately.
Question I wanted to ask about having an umbrella body that could help regulate the practices of some of these churches. So I'm going to go and ask about radicalization. Some persons are finding it difficult to use the distinction, or if it is radicalization or indoctrination. In this case, what kind of preaching how would we describe this kind of religious practice where people believe so fervently at the risk to themselves?
Well, radicalization is another language or another word for a cult. A cult is simply a doctrine that is overstretched, is taken too far. Is somebody taking probably a line in the scripture, a verse, or just 2-3 words, and he wants to capitalize on that to build a theme and eventually build a doctrine out of it. And by doing this, they intend to build around themselves a domain, a power base, and a powerhouse where nobody can question them because they are the untouchable, they are the anointed of the Lord, and so on and so forth. And if unsupervised, they can do a lot of damage to the body of Jesus Christ. Teachings about oneself are the main source or sources of radicalizing and indoctrinating the people that believe in one's teaching. If they are not within the reach, I will show you, for example, in America, we used to have somebody called Billy Graham. Billy Graham, even though the church and the ministry would coalesce around his name, but it would be called Billy Graham Association. That means, although it is identified in his name, but there is a board, a directorship that is sitting there to supervise, to look through the ministry, the doctrine, the teachings, all these other things that are associated with the call of God in the life of Billy Graham. And that is how we tend to go around teachings, because people would be sitting down to discuss and agree on the way to go. But in a case like the one of Shakahola, nobody questions this man. There is no board. There is no directorship. There is nobody that sits around with him. He wakes up one morning and he tells you, go sell your car, you sell your pot, your plot, bring the money here, we are going to Jesus in heaven. And you go do that. That is the radicalization. Our teachings that are not supervised, they cannot be verified through the scriptures. They are around the person. The Bible says in John 15, verse 26, that the Holy Spirit, the Comforter who is coming, who my Father promised, will testify, will talk, will witness about me, Jesus, not about himself. If you want to see somebody that is soon turning into a cult, their teachings coalesce around themselves. It's about them. Everything is about them. The priority is about them. The urgency is about them. The riches and wealth is about them. It's not about the adherents, the people who follow them, and it's not about God. So these are things and the people that ought to be brought into the picture. And the same way the government is dealing with Islamic fundamentalists and the radicals is the same way they should deal with the so-called Christian fundamentalists and radicalists who turn young people and people together.
I need to interject, Bishop, in the interest of time. I'll come back to you on the access and media regulators, the role that they have to play with the broadcast of such religious content to people. But before I do that, I want to speak to Carol quickly. Core to the Nsingi movement is the belief that covenant members who practice justice and righteousness are to be active advocates for the vulnerable and the marginal, as well as people without resources. This is a direct quote from your website. My question to you, Carol, is how will you help to advocate for these survivors of these particular cults going forward?
I think for me, what we are doing and what we continue to do is slowly by slowly educating and educating the Christian masses on the role of justice or the centrality of social justice within the faith, and helping them to be advocates for themselves. And also, justice and righteousness is the foundation of God's throne. That's from Psalms 89:14. Micah 6 verse 8 says, he has shown you, O man, what is good, but what does God require of you? To do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. And so this is what we do. We spread, we teach, we do community conversations on this. We are aspiring to be a movement that grows from one place to another. And so we are here to teach. If you want us to teach, we will teach. We are online, we are offline.
As much as I get, because at this point, there are victims who, the reason I ask this question is there are victims who are refusing help. There are victims who are still strongly radicalized. So in specific terms, for this group of people, even if your movement is not doing something at the moment, are you aware of any effort, either by the government or other NGOs, to help the victims that are now that are trying to be saved?
I think what you've said right now is making me think about an approach we can do. I can approach Hussein. Hussein Khalid from Haki Africa is someone who I can get access to. And maybe because of we are coming from a Christian perspective, we can start to have these people, these affected people, to start opening up. Yeah, I think
that is extremely important, and I'm sure a lot of persons will be grateful to see you collaborate with that NGO. Let me come to you, John. This is also a question I'll ask all three of you, if time will permit us. Are there warning signs that can be identified early to help prevent the rise of religious cults like this? Because from everything you've said, they don't suddenly start and get to this stage with many people dying. There is a progression. What can authorities and even the immediate communities do to notice, when they notice the spring up of such cults, to help nip it in the bud? John, the question is for you, sir.
So I think one best approach that can work really with dealing with this particular menace is under the issue of regulation. I think I saw my colleague mention something about regulation. So I think it is regulating religious institutions is something that now needs to come on the table as a way of preventing this particular situation. And I know sometimes it can be a complex issue and quite political as well. However, it's important to note that regulating, religious institutions can also, progressively deal with this particular situation. So one approach that can be used is to focus on educating individuals about, the risks associated with cults and other groups, that of course engage in abusive practices. And this may involve, providing information about the warning signs of cults, as well as, of course, resources for individuals who may be at risk of being recruited into such groups. I must mention that sometimes the challenge that we face with this situation is that individuals who've been indoctrinated completely and radicalized become very fearful, to even come out. So if we're able to provide resources for those particular individuals to be able to come out, even though they face risks, then that will help. And of course, another approach is also to work with religious institutions themselves to promote what we call ethical and responsible practices. For example, some countries have established a codes of conduct or best practices for religious organizations, case in point, Rwanda. And of course, these may include guidelines for preventing abusive, and I repeat again, abusive practices, and of course, promoting transparency and accountability.
All right.
I like to...
Okay, go ahead. Complete your thoughts. Sorry for the interruption.
Yes,
continue.
Hello?
Go ahead, sir. I was looking at the time. Just go ahead and complete your thoughts.
Yes, thanks. So I also like to speak about spirituality, safety and security, because also a subject that people really need to know, because most of followers are usually brainwashed. Look at the case that we were dealing with here, where people were brainwashed to starve themselves. And of course, some of the things that people need to begin looking out for as red flags or warning signs could be organizations that employ high pressure recruitment tactics, because that's what they do. So whenever you see an organization that's really trying to push an agenda, under very high pressure, it's something that we must look out for. We must also look out for organizations that demand for secrecy or loyalty, because some groups may actually require members to keep their involvement secret from family, from friends. And when you analyze deeply some of the victims of this particular case, you'll see people, selling their property, quitting their jobs, and keeping it, a secret until they are found dead. And then, of course, the other thing that they need to look out for is organizations that emphasize on, obedience and submission, because some organizations actually require members to follow strict rules and guidelines, or to submit to the authority of the group's leader without a question. And when you see also an organization that tries to isolate you from friends and family, please run. When you see an organization that tries to exploit you financially, you must also check that, because some groups usually require members to donate large sums of money or get rid of their assets and join that particular cult. Case in point, what we've experienced here. And when you look at these things critically, you notice that, for example, the leader of this particular cult, last time when he was being arraigned in court, he appeared healthy, meaning it was an individual who was eating while, preaching to his people, to avoid eating. And I mean, it is something that needs to be dealt, and it is a practice that's really affecting Africans more than any organization, other
continents. Yes, indeed.
And it can be... Yeah,
John, yes. I think you've highlighted quite a number of trigger points to look out for. And I know there are more. And those who are interested, I'm sure Carol will agree, that there are more trigger points to look out for. Something you said that stood out for me, the fact that the Paul Mackenzie, who is asking people to starve himself, does not look starved. He is looking healthy. Apparently, he's eating while asking others to starve. That's an important point to note. Because we've run out of time now, I'll just go to the bishop in wrapping up to ask him, because at the end of the day, it is the ball stops at their court. They hold a lot of responsibility. I would like you to end this conversation today with your thoughts on religious leaders taking better responsibility for the power they hold and for the preservation of life.
Well, thank you very much once again, Madam Felicity. Any serious leader of the church or religion, what they sold, must protect life. There is no part of the scriptures, whether Quran or whether that one of the Hindus or the Buddhists or the Christians, that allows anybody to teach messages that lead people to death. It is not there. Anybody trying to convince the public that is part of life is a liar. People have been cheated into doing this because they are only meeting to satisfy the ego and the selfishness of a particular leader. The responsibility of all of us combined is to ensure that our neighborhoods are patronized with the leaders who can meet together and talk. The Catholics have all the Catholic College of Bishops, the Anglicans have theirs, the SDAs have theirs, the Pentecostals and the Charismatics also have theirs. Unfortunately, the majority of these people who are trying to bring out weird doctrines and teachings belong to the Charismatics and the Pentecostals, because they see there is a gap there, there is a loophole. I want to say that we be responsible enough to be our brother's keeper. If somebody is preaching the word of God in the neighborhood and does not want to mingle with others, why is there a lot of secrecy about their ministry? What is it that they are doing that they don't want others to know? If you want to know that somebody is coming out to lead the public as prayer and do the kind of things that we are now seeing and reading from Mombasa, those is very secretive.
Apologies, Bishop. I know there's so much thoughts to share, but we are out of time for Village Square Africa. So I will say thank you very much to you, Carol, for speaking with us, Bishop Abuka, as well as John Lemerele for speaking with us on Village Square Africa today. All right, the program returns same time tomorrow for more in-depth conversations about Africa and confronting its geopolitical challenges. I thank you especially for giving us your attention. Bye for now.